It is Wednesday, my dudes.
Geek Out! Hey, welcome to another installment of Catching Up. I'm Sam.
I'm Chris.
I'm Jake.
We've got Jim Zub is pulling the hat trick. That's right. This is his third time on the show. He's here to talk about his new Image Comics miniseries, Glitterbomb, the Fame Game, which he does with Jabril Morris at Fawn. That debuts in comic book stores everywhere on Wednesday, September 20th, along with the 23rd issue of his other Image Comics creator-owned series, Wayward, both of which we talk about. And we get to talk about board games and Japanese culture in this one. It's always a good time having
And
Conan. That's right. Whenever we have Mr. Zub on. So without much further ado, let's get down to Zubness. And coming back on for the hat trick, we have Jim Zub coming on for the third time with the show. He's here to talk about Glitterbomb, the Fame Game, which kicks off the second volume of his horror series with the Jabril Morris at Fan. That's out in comic book stores everywhere on Wednesday, September 20th, along with issue 23 of his other creator-owned series, Wayward, as Rory delves into her Irish heritage over in, Ireland. And meanwhile, stuff goes south in Japan, as it always does in this horror kind of fantasy series. Jim, thanks again for coming on the show.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me on. I haven't worn out my welcome yet, so it's nice to be back.
In a lot of ways, I feel like, because this has only been about an interview show for about 2 years now, and the first time we had you on, you were promoting the third volume of Wayward, and now here you are in the middle of the fifth volume of Wayward.
Right.
So yeah, in a lot of ways, we kind of owe you, man, because that's how we found our mojo and everything.
Oh, thanks. That's very nice.
So
it's I love working on these books, and it's great to be able to just find people who are excited to read comics and talk comics. I love it.
So with this new volume of Glitterbomb, the Fame Game, what made you want to do it as a second volume, as a brand new number one? It is a very accessible jumping on point for people who hadn't necessarily read the first volume, though it picks up moments after that one closes out. What made you want to do it as a new number one as opposed to, say, Glitterbomb number 5?
I think, first of all, it's really shifts the focus, not to spoil the end of the first miniseries, but Farah's story is finished. And so this is really a fresh kind of point, like this story about, Caden Clay. Although she was in the first series and she has a connection to Farah, she really is her own person and has a separate story. And so whether that means that a reader can pick it up and start just with this one completely fresh, or, you're picking up the second miniseries because you like the first one, I think it does stand on its own. Everything that you need to know is explained in the first few pages of the new issue. And it's a nice separation in terms of, this thing is its own kind of complete story to be told. On top of that, I've honestly never done that format of a series of miniseries. And so it was something where I just looked and I said, oh, this is a kind of approach that I haven't done before. I want to explore that and see how that changes my approach in terms of storytelling, in terms of pacing, and everything in between.
With this, as you mentioned, it does focus on Caden. We're seeing, if it's possible, if there's anybody crueler than people working in the entertainment industry in Los Angeles, it's teenagers. And so what made you kind of want to combine this, almost like Dangerous Minds, except there isn't any Michelle Pfeiffer character to save the day, or is there? What made you want to kind of shift the focus to this more kind of young adult, adolescent perspective?
Well, I think that first of all, it's nice to be able to switch things up. Like Farah's story was very much about a, bitter sort of seasoned veteran of the Hollywood system. And Caden's coming into this completely fresh and naive and unaware of, all the ways that the system kind of grinds you down. And so, first of all, it's a really different perspective. But then, she's also young and going to high school, and the way that your life would change if you become famous, the way that your friendships or the people you thought were your friends, interact with you, the way people your age and their sort of frustrations and jealousy and all that kind of stuff. I think it's really fertile ground, especially in a culture where we are just saturated with media news and with entertainment and with kind of tragedy fame, for lack of a better term, where you've got people who are famous literally for just being in the vicinity of terrible things that have happened, and that they become our sort of touchstone for those events. And, Kaden wants to be a celebrity, and she thought that her way into that was by being an actress. That was the way she talked in the first miniseries. And now she's going to get what she wants, but, as with everything in this kind of story, not the way she expects and not with the results necessarily that she hopes.
And we're starting to see more of the nature of the evil that exists in the Glitterbomb universe. It looks like the monsters in this aren't necessarily bloodthirsty, though they don't mind, a little sanguination every now and again. But they're more kind of, are they feeding off both that longing and that despair?
I think that, and this is the thing, I don't want to tip my hand too much on that, but part of what makes them, I think, really visceral is that mystery, is that idea of we don't have all the answers. One of the things I want to try and avoid is just people focusing entirely on the monster and sort of saying, okay, is it vulnerable to silver? All right, great. Let's get silver bullets and shoot them dead. Like that's not ever been the point. It's always sort of an emotional kind of outlet or a savage way to kind of amp up the tension or release, these kind of vicious feelings and vengeful, desires. And it feeds on it and it lashes out and it does all sorts of different things. I don't want to get too specific. Some of that's going to be revealed in the story, but more than anything else, the horror comes from the character stuff rather than just kind of gooey monster going on a rampage.
And in a lot of ways, especially in this opening arc or this opening issue of the Fame game, the most horrific stuff isn't necessarily the bloodletting, though there is bloodletting to be sure. It's how the other characters really treat each other.
Right, and that's always been the case. I think that was the case in the first series too, is that, a lot of our reviews we got, they said, oh, the creature stuff's gross, but people are way nastier and way more, kind of cold and cruel to each other. That's really what sticks with people when they read the series, that the creature is almost, it's not perfunctory. It's not, it's obviously a crucial part of it, but it's just one part of the whole thing.
It's almost like that ugliness personified in a way, or not personified,
exactly.
But yeah, like I don't even know how it looks. Tentacleified.
Yeah, tentacleified.
Tenticulated.
Yes. There you go.
That's why they pay me the big bucks for
there
work.
It is, man. Now, Jabril had been a fairly new addition to the wide world of comic books when you guys were working on the first volume. How is your, since then he's worked over with Marvel stuff, he's done like all new Wolverine and that sort of thing. How is your kind of collaborative spirit and your working relationship with him changed going into the Fame game?
Well, I think we're both pretty crazy busy, which is a little intense. The good thing is that, as soon as he did Glitterbomb, it put him on the radar, and Ricky Purden, who's the talent manager at Marvel, quite wisely saw what he was capable of right from the get-go, and they've hooked him up with quite a bit of Marvel work. I was hopeful that would be the case, and so even one of the other kind of advantages of doing it as a series of miniseries is that we have that gap between each story. So he's been able to work on other things and raise his profile and build his experience, and I've been working away on other stuff as well at the same time. Both at Marvel and IDW, and of course Wayward, my other Image book. So it's been nice to have kind of a little bit of space for both of us to grow and then come back together and kind of be like, okay, we're even stronger than we were before, and we're more confident and capable in terms of storytelling, and bring those skills to the next story in what I'm hoping will be a trilogy of miniseries.
With you had mentioned Wayward earlier. You guys are in the middle, right? Really, smack dab in the middle of your fifth story arc.
Mm-hmm.
And there's kind of this theme that's running through this volume that kind of exposes some of the larger themes of the series as a whole. First off, congratulations on getting Wayward option for television. I think that's the big news.
Thank you.
That I feel like that happened like it was right around Emerald City, if I remember correctly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
it was actually a little bit after Emerald City.
But there's a big arc going on both in the Japanese and the Irish segments that pain is the underlying motivator for everything, and everyone has to persist behind the pain. What was it that kind of drew you to add that, to have that theme throughout? Because when we had first seen Rory, she was very self-destructive, or she had engaged in self-harm, and all these characters are almost kind of drawn together in their isolation and their alienation and their loneliness. What was it about that? And you could argue that that pain is a big motivator in Glitterbomb as well, that, this longing to be relevant. Either it's Farah going through her midlife crisis, or Caden trying to just figure things out as a high schooler. First off, is everything okay? Second off,
it's funny, right? Because as a whole, I'm having it's been a really good year for me, like writing wise and career wise, and things are going quite well. So when I'm delving into some of this stuff, it can take a little bit of work to kind of get myself in the right headspace. Like, okay, I got to turn the angst on. Like, I got to really, remind myself where we're going with the story, and have it planned out, but really tap into that kind of stuff. It is a little bit of almost like role playing, where you're sort of saying, okay, telling this angsty story, or we have these characters who are in a lot of pain, and right now I'm generally doing relatively well. So it takes a little bit of oomph to sort of dig down into those things and remind yourself, okay, these are the things that frustrate you, or these are the things that, your fears and anxieties. And then I turn on the news, and for some reason it's not so hard to tap into those feelings. I don't know how that is for some reason.
You live in Canada, you're fine.
Oh, I know. We're still in the blast radius or whatever, but yeah.
The splatter zone, if you will.
Sure.
So yeah, what is it about that kind of that unifying theme of pain across your creator-owned work that that you find appealing as a storyteller?
It's an interesting question, actually. I'm gonna have to go talk to a therapist now. It's weird, right? Like Skull Kickers has more slapsticky pain. Everyone's an idiot, getting themselves in trouble, and both Wayward and Glitterbomb, like you said, have got a much more angsty kind of pathos to their pain. I just, when I think about particularly Wayward, this idea of when you're a teenager, you're not yet an adult, and you're trying to figure out who you're meant to be, or what you want to be, or what life is going to deliver for you. I think, the vast majority of us go through a lot of frustrating internal kind of doubt, and whether it's emotional pain or physical in some cases, or emotion, like psychological, whatever you want to call it. Like it's something that we can all kind of empathize with, and it kind of pulls me back to that age where I think about how nervous I was, or upset I was, or how difficult it seemed to be because I couldn't plant a flag into where I thought the future was going to end up. And then we amp that up with, more extreme fictional elements. In the case of Wayward, obviously this war between generations of the supernatural. And in the case of Glitterbomb, this somewhat demonic kind of creature offering you the ability to lash out or get revenge or whatever may have you. And I think that it just provides a real powerful kind of storytelling fodder that we can dig into, and something that people can kind of understand, rather than just a story where people are empowered. It's people paying a price for that power, or it's people making difficult choices, or in some cases the flat out wrong choice, as they're heading through this uneasy journey.
I remember the last time you were on, I asked what it was about, you found so inherently cool about Japanese culture between, Wayward and Samurai Jack and all that. Is there kind of some of that with Rory's own quest for self-discovery as she goes to Japan at the start of the series?
I think, whether, I don't know how much traveling you've done personally, but going to somewhere very different can really kind of shake you out of your assumptions about how the world works, or how people work, or what your priorities are. In some cases, it becomes a real distinct kind of chapter in your life, depending on where you go and what you do. And I know for myself, when I've traveled, there's this interesting feeling of sort of being like, okay, I'm out of my comfort zone. I'm trying something different. I want to reevaluate my priorities, or I want to see how other people live and where they take joy and stuff like that. And so, for Rory, when she first arrives in Japan, to her, she wants it to be this fresh start. And what she doesn't know, of course, is that she's getting pulled into something far more kind of nefarious that she's been kind of manipulated into, as we've sort of revealed in the last few issues, that this has always been kind of a plan, and she has been pulled along as part of it, even when she thought she was making her own decisions. And I think, that's again, one of those things where if your goal is freedom, or if your goal is self-definition, the most frustrating thing is to have that taken away from you, or the most frustrating thing is to realize that what you thought were your own decisions and your own, self-actualization is actually someone else pushing you around the board.
Well, it's interesting because since the start of the series, Rory is we've only ever really seen Rory in Japanese culture. And for really the last arc and a half, she's been in the fatherland, for lack of a better term. She's on the Emerald Isle. And there's definitely this sense of resentment. Though there is a really beautiful moment at the start of the fourth arc where her father, Dermot, finally discovers that, they share this moment when Dermot finds out that Rory's mother's dead. Mm-hmm. Because you guys had, for the entire book, you guys had kind of hit the ground running. It was, it was like dust spiders, or it was like kaiju, or the what's the Japanese term for demonic turtles? Kappa.
Oh, the Kappa, yeah.
Yeah. And so there is this really beautiful moment at the start of, I want to say it's in the middle of the fourth arc, where they're both like, oh, they kind of share this mutual pain, this mutual grief. But then by arc 5, they're right back into it.
Well, and that's one of those things where, it's difficult. It's a pretty, varied cast. And like you say, we had a lot of stuff happen in particular the first 5 issues. It was just a breakneck kind of pace of things changing and characters getting pulled into this. And so when her mother dies, it's almost like she doesn't have time to grieve. She doesn't have time to settle into it. And the next thing we know, she's pulled along through the weave. And then after that, she ends up getting, subsumed by the Joragumo and all this sort of stuff. And so when we looked at it, it was literally the first moment when she was kind of free of manipulation and also able to kind of address it, really have time to understand what's been going on, or just by saying it to someone else, by speaking to her father and getting him up to date, essentially coming to terms with it, like this has happened and there's no going back.
With Caden, she, is another character that similarly was kind of thrust in something. I guess you could argue Samurai Jack was too, because as far as he knows, he's just going to fight the literal Japanese personification of the devil and gets flung into the far future.
Right.
With Caden, she's just kind of a babysitter with big, big city dreams, and
a lot of assumptions. Yeah.
Yeah. And so with a lot of that is a lot of, and she's still figuring things out too. Both her and Rory are teenagers. With Caden, though, is it a question of finding how much agency she has as she's drawn into this dark, murderous, supernatural web, or is it kind of how much agency is she going to have moving forward into the Fame game?
Well, and that's one of those things where, when you're famous, you have people desire your attention, or they want to know things, or they want to be around you. So in some ways you have some semblance of control, or you have some whatever illusion of kind of power. But on the other hand, she's, quite naive, and she's quite young, and all of this is really overwhelming to her. And the fact that she could potentially make money from this, or the fact that she could, be more than what she was before, as far as she's concerned, that, her priority is that she says in the first series, she wants to do something that matters. But, what is, for lack of a better term, what matters about celebrity culture? You know what I mean? Like, are they actually changing the world? Particularly this kind of fame where, if someone is Kato Kalin, right? And you're in the house when O.J. Simpson potentially, may have killed someone. Is that some useful form of fame, or is it just literally you're caught in this maelstrom of happenstance? You know what I mean? And that's the most awkward thing about it. What's famous about Kaden is not her. What's famous about Kaden is not her own skills or her as a person, but it's literally her proximity to this death and destruction, to this other person who is gone and cannot be communicated with. And so this is the closest you've got. You know what I mean? And that's got to be really, really awkward. That's got to be terrible, where you're not even capable of defining yourself. You're always defined as your relationship to someone else, let alone such a terrible thing.
And something that I think that Caden has that, Farah had her son that kind of kept her in check in a maternal way, whereas Caden kind of has almost the inverse of that. She has a very kind of protective mother figure. She's kind of got this. It's not quite Carrie, but it's not. What Jake? Give me a good mother figure that's not Carrie mom.
Oh God! Putting you on the spot. A good mother figure that's not
like nurturing.
Yeah, like the opposite of Carrie's mom.
Yeah. That was like
Mother Goose.
Yeah, her mother's like Caden's mother is not abusive by any means. She's just, overwhelmed as well, and kind of has her own difficulties and things that she's dealing with. And this stuff happening with her kid just seems overwhelming. It's not something that she's prepared for or properly able to focus on. And then her day job's pulling her away from it. Her mother's just frustrated. He's dealing with a teenager, let alone a teenager that now seems to be sliding into, this industry that doesn't care at all about you and all it wants to do is get what it needs, which is more fodder for the 24-hour news cycle.
Which these days is probably more relevant than ever.
You were talking
about that was one of those things where I realized as we were going through, originally in the original story outline, it was more focused just on kind of youth in Hollywood. So that idea of, she's young and now the Hollywood system is going to treat her like crap because she doesn't know any better. And I realized, man, the media end of it is so much more potent and quite relevant in the here and now, I think. And so that started to take on a much more pronounced part of the story for me.
With we see the detective from the first story arc in the Fame game. How much how many other supporting characters are we going to see kind of reappear without, I suppose, giving the game away too much?
Right, giving the game away, literally. Isaac is an important part of it. He had just a small role in the first one, crucial, but small, and sort of seeing his, PTSD, like the way that he's been intensely affected by everything that's happened, I think gives us some added insight. But I didn't just want to trot everyone out like, one after another. Like it's not just, really is Caden's story, and she's separated from some of those people. She doesn't have a close relationship with, Farah's other contacts. But on the other hand, there are elements that are definitely going to shift over. And I think some unexpected ones as well. People that had very, very small roles, like the agent and stuff like that, are now more important as they're moving into a different kind of identity in the Fame game. And I want to try and keep it cohesive, that it feels like it's the same universe, obviously, and it's the same story continuing, but that, again, it can stand on its own, that everything you need is in that first issue. Okay, horrible tragedy happened. This is what happens to Caden. If you didn't read the previous story, you know what that is, and if you did, then it'll take on that much more poignancy.
So in the case of the Fame game, the big unifying thread here is being linked through trauma. Right.
And this idea that, Caden's getting what she wants, but she really has no idea what that looks like, and she has no idea what the end game is. Like, once you're known as the babysitter of possibly the most horrific killer in, modern American history, what does that do for you? Where do you go from there? Do you know what I mean? And how does that end up? How does the creature sort of throw that into a different state? You know what I mean? Like, I don't want to tip too much, but obviously the creature or some form of it is still out there and is, involved in her life or drawing her in. So what does that mean now, and where do we go, and who's next on sort of the chopping block?
So if there's a thematic link between both volumes of the Fame game, and presumably throughout the entire series into a potential third arc, it's that everybody gets their wish for fame, but in like the worst possible way.
Well, just that. I guess, I don't want to sort of pull out and point people and say it's all about this, because I think part of it, I was fascinated to see how people reacted to Farah. Some of the reactions I got from people were not necessarily what I thought I wrote, but that's always really cool too. Some people were like, oh, she's 100% justified in murdering people. And other people were like, oh, she's just tragically awful and, spiraling out of control. And, I think Caden very much in the same light. Some of the things Caden does, you can easily look and say, oh, I could see why someone would make that decision, even if it's not the decision I would make.
Now, Jim, to switch gears a bit, and I understand if you can't divulge too much, but how did Wayward getting optioned by Manga Entertainment all kind of come about?
It was actually kind of a long process. So quite early on, I couldn't put an exact date on it. I know the first volume was definitely out. I was approached by one of the producers over at Manga, and they had been passed the book by an acquaintance of theirs and said it was really good, and they were intrigued by it and just wanted to ask me more questions about, how it came about and all this kind of stuff. And so we started sort of talking from there, but we didn't really come to any kind of agreement. It was very preliminary, just sort of, hey, you're doing this cool thing, we might be interested. And we threw some potential options, not to use the term the wrong way, but, opportunities back and forth, and nothing seemed to really gel. And that was okay. But, in the span of time while we were releasing Volume 2, Volume 3, and, about to release Volume 4, the anime industry has been changing. The manga industry has been evolving, and the international nature of anime as entertainment has really grown. There's a huge market for it, whether that's on Netflix or Crunchyroll or things like that. And what everyone's noticing on these streaming platforms and on these media platforms is, what's bringing people over is exclusive content, and what's bringing people over is the ability to, have new and exciting content. And so I have an agent now. It always feels weird saying that out loud because it makes it sound like I'm being really cocky or something. But it just, I have someone representing me now. And I gave him the contact info for Manga Entertainment because we had previously talked. And he really followed up with them and, explained the kind of good position we were in and the ability for Wayward to hopefully cross-pollinate a lot of different audiences. That it has a bit of a North American storytelling flair, but is definitely in a Japanese cultural element, that there's all sorts of really cool, that yokai, in the span of time have really become a little bit more, I wouldn't say mainstream, but they're definitely, people are more aware of them than ever before in North America, and that we had good material to work with. And so we started negotiating again, much more seriously, and started bandying it back and forth, like what was the possibility there. And even then it took months and months and months. And in that time, Manga Entertainment's been leveraging sort of other co-productions. I don't know if you guys saw, there was an article about anime on Netflix, and one of the shows they talk about is Cannon Busters. And that's, an original property put together by a guy named LaShawn Thomas, who's worked on like Avatar: The Last Airbender and the Boondocks and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. And he's working with the exact same production team. And so they're kind of trailblazing a bunch of whether it's the studio stuff and the production and how the co-production will work. And we're going to benefit a great deal from that because now they're seeing that it's working. they want to set up more productions. And so we were one of the ones that were right on deck and as a possibility, and it kind of kicked into gear from there. Obviously, I can't go into too much of the negotiation stuff, but what was great about it was, they didn't want to come in and change tons of it. One of the jokes that I made early on with Wayward was that it was never going to get turned into media because they would immediately want to like set it in New York City and have a bunch of ninjas jumping around, and it would be about an American kid with a katana or something, and that's not what manga entertainment wants to do. They want to be really faithful to the source material. They want to have it a Japanese story about Japanese characters in the same way that the comic is, and they want to really build, the kind of story that we've got in the comics, and in some ways even expand some of it potentially even further. When we were sitting down and doing the story documentation, I put together what's called a story Bible, which walks them through the decisions I made and, where the story is going and all sorts of stuff like that, some of the character revelations. And one of the nice things about having so much material already done is you can look back on it with a real fresh set of eyes, and you can go, okay, we can foreshadow these later story revelations even better, or we can, build in these kinds of elements even sooner. And it is kind of nice. You see the similar kind of thing when Robert Kirkman and the crew were doing the Walking Dead TV show. They realized how potent that plot line with Shane was, Shane and Rick's wife. And in the comic, that's like not even a half issue. And in the show, it's like almost the entire first season. They carry the emotional weight of that in a really cool way, that they had the benefit of going, oh, this is really potent. We can make this even stronger. And I think we've got some of those kinds of things as well, where we looked at it and we said, okay, we can delve even deeper into some of the angsty stuff happening at school, and we can, build even deeper into some of the other plot lines and plot threads that are going to be coming up later on.
As someone that's a lifelong fan of manga, of anime, you do kind of bring up a good point. How does it, watching it grow, how does it feel that it's no longer this niche thing, that it's no longer people are just like, oh, Speed Racer, Akira, but now that, Netflix, I never thought in a million years, like Voltron is back on Netflix, and
right.
we're seeing Castlevania get adapted into an anime, and we're seeing anime really kind of, they're having their own massive conventions, Otakon or whichever. How does it feel kind of seeing that what you grew up with as a niche start to enter more and more into the mainstream?
It's super weird. Like, to say that it was a niche is such an understatement. I started getting into anime when the fandom was really, really in its kind of nascent state. Like, my brother was in university and I was in high school, and he went to the University of Waterloo here in Ontario, and they were one of the first universities that had, what was originally called ARPANET, or the internet. And so the pre-World Wide Web, there were these BBSs. They were just like forums where you would post up and respond to each other. And so recreation.arts.anime was like one of the old boards where people would talk about Japanese animation, and they would trade, scripts back and forth for anime before they were even released in North America. Or like many of them would never be released in North America. They would get Japanese laser discs and order them from Japan, and then subtitle them through really old clunky computer equipment. The first manga that I ever read was from Japanese volumes, and I literally had the printed out script beside me, just on like old printer paper with the holes on the side of it. And I would just sort of look at one page and then look at the artwork and then look at the translation and be like, oh, okay, that guy's name is a pun for bread. Got it. And, just read this stuff because I was so fascinated by it. And so to think that would ever be mainstream, to think that it just blows my mind. Even when stuff like Ghost in the Shell, not the live action movie, but the original anime came out, and it had quite a response in the mainstream, I thought that was amazing, and that was nothing. The idea that there would be manga unflipped, then people would be reading it kind of traditional Japanese style or things like that. That just, if you would have told me that in high school, I would have told you were crazy. So to think of it now that it's now a huge part of media, and in many ways it's the international nature of it has been a saving grace to the industry because the Japanese market has been shaky, over the last few years. So I think it's phenomenal. I go and I see it now. You've got people who've grown up with anime and manga, so it's no longer just a niche market, but it's just another part of kind of the pop culture, tapestry. And that's a lot of fun and really exciting too. So, it's something where even in my trips to Japan, the very first time that I went, I would go literally days without seeing a non-Japanese person, and now you go over there and it's like, it's tourism is booming. It's a real incredible time for Japanese culture and art and entertainment.
So kind of switching gears again, like one of the things, like we usually record the show on Wednesdays, and of course that's, New Comic Book Day, and Sam and I will go to our local comic shop and pick up books, then we'll go grab coffee and just kind of talk about, what we picked up and get ready for the show. And one of the things we were talking about today that we kind of realized is we've been lucky enough to have some like really great people on the show. And one of the kind of like
yourself included,
of course.
Thanks. Also you. Yeah. Some really great people, and also you.
And yeah, fell into that one. And
no, it's all good. Don't worry about
it. And one of the characters that we've kind of were like, holy crap, like, is kind of been reoccurring is Conan the Barbarian. Like a lot of people we've talked to have left their mark on Conan, and when I was at the shop today, like when you worked on the Conan Red Sonja book, I was working at the shop and it was out in single issues. And today, even though I've like had the issues, I'm a sucker for a good hardcover, and the hardcover for that is gorgeous. Like it just put it on the shelf and let it do its work kind of thing. But I was curious, what it's like to kind of get in the mind of Conan and kind of your history with him, because I feel like he's one of those characters that everybody knows about, even if they've never read a Conan the Barbarian story. I mean, he's just he's been around for 80
he's a
some
real
years
iconic character of fiction, and the concept, the sort of broader character brushstrokes seem indelible to everyone, even if you've never actually read the books. Obviously the Arnold Schwarzenegger movies, and stuff like that have carried such weight over the years. And that was my first experience with Conan, because that came out in the early 80s. So I was young and impressionable and playing Dungeons and Dragons. So like anything fantasy would just, tick my talk. And I joke around that Skull Kickers, is my love letter to sword and sorcery. And all of Skull Kickers can be summed up in two moments of Conan. The one where he's drunk and he falls face first into his bowl of porridge, and where he punches a camel in the face.
Those two gifts live on forever and ever, and in meme form too. So
that's just Skull Kickers. That's all. If you never get a chance to read Skull Kickers, just watch those two parts on repeat, and you'll pretty much get the entire 34 issues delivered to you face first. And then I read the Howard books and, fell even deeper in love with Conan, because what you see in the movies is such it's a pastiche of a bunch of different elements of Conan from the books. And it's just broad brushstrokes of some of those character bits done in a really cool visual way, because that's what you want movies to do. But the books are wonderfully visceral and have a real... They build such atmosphere, which is what I love about them. There's this sense of pervasive dread that runs through a lot of them. And there's never any doubt that Conan is not necessarily a hero. He's like a blue collar fantasy dude pulled into things beyond his understanding. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think that's one of the things I really love about it. In many cases, he's not the guy at the front of an army leading the charge. He's this dude causing, I don't want to swear, causing stuff in the background, making trouble that will have this sort of repercussion later on, and that's what I like about him, is he's not heroic per se. He's just a dude trying to survive, or trying to find wealth, or trying to find himself in these terrible circumstances. And heroism is almost a byproduct of what happens when you cross him. Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely,
Yeah, it's one of the things I kind of like about it. There's this real selfish survivalist instinct. There's also this sense of, personal honor, like don't mess with me and mine, that kind of really defines a lot of his actions. And there's something very true about that, very simple about that. As much as we all want to be a paragon and the best people and do always the right thing, there's also this real instinctive kind of approach of I got mine, I gotta do what's right for me, and I gotta survive in a world that is heartless and mysterious and strange at times. And I feel like Conan has a very visceral kind of, people respond to him viscerally because there is that simplicity, there is that sense of it'd be nice to be strong and to be focused and to know who you are in the face of danger, or know what you want in difficult circumstance. And Conan is very very focused in purpose and very sure of himself, even if sometimes that ego gets him into far, far more danger. I like writing characters that drive story forward. One of the mistakes that people make is they want their characters to be likable, and so they don't drive them into conflict. They have them pulled into conflict constantly. So they'll say, well, the bad guy made them do it, or, they're just in the wrong place at the wrong time. There's a bit of that to Conan, but he just as often will drive himself into danger. He'll make good or bad decisions that push the story forward. And it makes him exciting and it makes him interesting. He's kicking down a door and he's lipping off to someone. And that's the kind of stuff that makes storytelling happen, in a fun and visceral kind of way.
Yeah, I've been making my way very slowly through like the original, Robert E. Howard stuff, and finally recently read, Tower of the Elephant for the first time, which I know most people kind of put on the pedestal as like one of the best, if not, kind of the best of the original Conan stuff. And I think
that's good and creepy.
I think you were talking about like kind of like his characterization. I think one of the best ways to sum him up now that I've read that story is, when he kind of, they tell him the Tower of the Elephant, they tell him about this jewel and everything. He's like, sounds good enough for me. Let's go do it. And he comes across, is it Taurus, the guy that he comes across, and they kind of go on a team up to go, to get this jewel. And, Taurus is like, I've been planning this for months and months to do this. What about you? And he's like, I just thought of this tonight.
Yeah, exactly.
And that, I thought that was such a perfect way to sum it up. And also too, like I'm doing it on Audible, so like I'm driving home, like white knuckle as he's like fighting, an 80-foot snake, or taking, and also just the language of it too, because there's so many ways you can say like go to hell to somebody in a book, but the way Conan will say it is like most people would be like, go to hell, or I'm gonna kill you. But his way is like, if you touch me again, you will be dining with your ancestors in hell tonight. And like that's such a great, and also too that like the first story you read, or in terms of like what Howard put out, he's a king. And so know that he's going to somehow get there. But then you read these other stories where he is, I was here because I'm stealing this or I'm doing this. But like you said, I think you can do kind of anything with Conan because he's kind of lived it all and has this amazing kind of story that is kind of left open for you to kind of jump in at any point in his life and tell a really interesting story.
Yeah. There's different, the impetuous kind of youth giving way to kind of the bitter, king. I think that everything in between is, all of them, they all have permutations that make them interesting. What made me so happy about doing the Conan Red Sonja crossover is we got to do kind of all three eras, of the character, because we had something that they did when they were young comes back to haunt them when they're older. And you see them kind of almost switch roles. Like, Conan is so brash and confident as a youth, and Sonja is the one that's being careful. And then when they're older, she doesn't give a damn anymore. And she's confident in herself. And he is this bitter, not unsure. He's capable, but he feels more worn down by, all the things he's been through. And she kind of brings almost that adventurous spirit out in him again, which I find really, engaging and interesting with the two of them, the interplay there, the way we did it in the book. Yeah, it's just a ton of fun. It's so weird too. Doing that Conan miniseries was such a nice full circle moment because my very first professional comics credit was actually as a colorist on recoloring reprints of Conan comics for Dark Horse.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, so I was working at the Udon studio and they got the contract to recolor these issues. And the first story I did is Terror and the Elephant.
Oh, that's awesome.
And yeah,
that's a hell of a one. Yeah.
Right, it's pretty great. And so it was pretty fun to be able to recolor these stories that I knew quite well from the novels. And at the same time, they were bringing out the Kurt Busiek, Carrie Nord issues of the comic.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just over the moon with how good they were and how just phenomenal the artwork was. And Kurt did a wonderful job at tying these old stories together and filling in some of the gaps in the continuity of the novels. And, never imagining someday I would get my chance to write some Conan as well. And so, yeah, it really felt kind of appropriate many years later, to finally be able to write some Conan and bring, some of those aspects. And it's an original story, but definitely trying to channel some of those character traits and elements and make them feel as visceral as possible.
Yeah, no, it was good stuff. I really enjoyed it. So you definitely,
thank you.
Definitely left your mark on Conan and Red Sonja too. I mean, the fact you got to play with both of those characters is pretty cool.
Well, and Gail had such a great take on Sonya, and so she brought all those strengths to bear.
Absolutely,
and really understood what made for great interplay between those two characters. We were crunching on plot and crunching on character, and ostensibly I was usually tweaking Conan's dialogue if she wrote it, and she was tweaking Sonya's dialogue if I wrote it. But there was a lot of back and forth just in general where we were making decisions of, to try and make a cohesive whole.
Mm-hmm.
I think the one thing that made me laugh was when we finished the first script and before Dan Panosian started drawing it, we realized we had two very different ways of writing. So I always write sound effects and Gail almost never does. So you could always tell which page was which because all of a sudden mine would have clang clang of swords and people getting thumped against walls, and hers was just like silent death. And I went, okay, we got to figure out which one we're doing, whether or not we're doing sound effects or not, because otherwise the book's going to read really stupid, in the final.
Yeah, that's cool. And also, I guess Gail's going to be doing Conan Wonder Woman soon. Too,
yeah,
pretty
yeah,
sweet
I'm looking forward to reading that.
See her dive into that world again.
Mm-hmm.
So, Jim, I don't know if you remember, but something we ask everybody that comes on the show: what are you currently geeking out over?
Do you remember what I said last time?
Overwatch.
Overwatch?
Yeah,
I'm still probably geeking out over Overwatch.
I've been playing that recently too. That's a fun game.
I have no time for video games, so honestly, I don't have a lot of time to play Overwatch or anything else. But they released the high def StarCraft, the StarCraft remastered or whatever. So I played that a little bit. I'm also geeking out really hardcore on board games. So our crew plays a lot of cooperative board games, and so I've been geeking out on a lot of those. It's a nice sort of change of pace, and instead of staring at a screen again, it's kind of nice to sit around a table and hang with my friends. Actually. Okay, I take that all back. Whether or not you keep this or you just clip the edit, I know exactly what I'm geeking out over. I've finally been running a D&D game again.
Oh.
So yeah, I love Dungeons and Dragons. Obviously,
you wrote the book.
I write the comic, and yet I haven't had a chance to play a regular game in years and years. And so over the Christmas holidays, I've been listening to these. There's this thing. Do you know what playcasts are? So there's like the Adventure Zone or Critical Role or the Glass Cannon podcast, and they're literally just people sitting around playing D&D, and they record it. And you wouldn't think that would be very enticing, and yet it can be really good if it's a good group and they've got good kind of banter and interplay. It's a ton of fun. And I was listening to some of those as I would be prepping pages for the Flatter or things like that on Wayward. I would just have this playing in the background, and it just like geeked me so hard. I was like, oh, I remember we're playing D&D. I got to get back into this. Over the holidays, I got my friends together, and I said, okay, I'm going to run a few sessions and see how it goes. And we started playing, and we started recording. And the nice thing about the recording is I don't know, have you guys played tabletop role-playing games before? You play?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
board games. Well, nowadays everyone's on their smartphones 24/7. So just keeping people focused on the task at hand can be a real pain in the ass. Where you're like, hey guys, I'm teaching you how to play the rules. Oh, never mind, you're on Twitter, And because we're recording this podcast, no one wants to feel like an idiot. So everyone's really focused on the game because you need to, it's your turn. You got to say something witty and interesting. And so right off the bat, the quality of the game went up, substantially. And then on top of that, people did more fun, cool things, which got people more excited, which got them more into it, which made the game better. And, and away we go. And so I've been geeking out really hard on Dungeons and Dragons again, which works out pretty well. So yeah, I've been really, really loving it and digging into some of the old adventures that I remembered from when I was a kid, but running them for my friends who don't know any of them. And we're playing under the new 5th edition rules, but going through these 1st edition modules. So I get to nostalgically geek out and also kind of modern geek out.
We had the guys that do the Realm on, Jeremy Hahn and Seth Peck. They're getting into D&D in a big way, and Matt Hawkins over in Top Cow is a big D&D guy too.
Excellent. I didn't know Matt was a D&D guy. I'm going to have to totally talk to him about that.
Oh, yeah.
That is awesome. See, this is the thing, and D&D's really seeing kind of a renaissance lately because, I'm not trying to sound too dorky about it, but I can't help it. But
the show's Geek Out. You're fine.
It's going through a renaissance because people want visceral experiences that, they don't just want their media and entertainment to be commodified and prepackaged and sent to them. And, just on the level of watching TV, they want to watch it when they want to watch it in the format they want to watch it on the platform they want to watch it. Mm-hmm. But in terms of storytelling, board games and role-playing games are seeing this huge surge because we are all staring at our phones and at our screens at work and in our free time. So this concept of, hey, we're going to sit around and work together on this. We're going to make this. We're going to collaboratively be involved in this, and either in person or over Skype. We're going to do this together feels so different and feels so freeing. I think people are really taking to it in a way that they probably potentially never have before, and I feel like it's the right time, for that kind of customized entertainment in a way that, a video game can't even match, the type of improvisation that a dungeon master and a group of people, the storylines that you can come up with, the weird, crazy ideas, spontaneity that you can have at the table. You can't get that even with the deepest, most in-depth video game. It can't keep up with the ridiculousness that a basic, group in D&D can do. And so I feel like it's the right game at the right time. And I feel like people are really taking to it, and people who have grown up on it are now, big players in Hollywood and big players in media and entertainment, and realizing that this stuff all kind of feeds on the same kind of material, that emotionally we as, nerds, like, we love this stuff. And that, if the Marvel movies can be the juggernaut of entertainment, that there's no reason why Dungeons and Dragons can't have a big role to play in terms of the future. And I don't know if that means movies or just more interactive entertainment, but I feel like it really is a special time for the game.
There's a lot of bars here in the DC area that are very board game centric. They have board game nights, or their entire shtick is there's a bar here in DC called the Boardroom, and it's just board games.
Us too. We've got one called Snakes and Lattes. It's really big, and they've got 2 locations now, and one of them is absolutely huge. And when it first got announced this place was coming around, people thought, oh, that's kind of cute. And then they realized, oh, this is big. It's big business, but it's also, giving people a common ground to come together and to have something to do instead of just drinking or just staring at a television and watching sports or a movie. Let's do this thing together where we interact. Let's have a bit more engagement in our entertainment. And I feel like it definitely is going to grow rather than, shrink. I just got back from Gen Con last weekend. I go every year, which, 10-year-old me would have crapped a brick to hear that, you know. Because when I was a kid, like my brother and I, we'd get the old D&D modules, and in the front, a lot of them were based on tournaments that were at Gen Con. So it would say in the front of the D&D module, this story, the Slaver Stockade, was originally a tournament in Gen Con 82 or something. And we would be like, oh, Gen Con. Someday, maybe we can go to Gen Con. And now I go every year, and I get to, you know, interact with some of the people that wrote and illustrated these things that I grew up on and were such influential part of my nerdy upbringing, you know, and meeting a whole new generation of people that are getting into the hobby for the first time, and families, you know, like I don't want to come down on the comic industry too hard, but the game industry has done a phenomenal job at carrying the torch to the next generation of players, far more so than I think comics have done for the next generation of readers. Comics have to seem to have this chip on their shoulder where they're like, take us seriously. We're really important medium. And you're like, okay, you are. Take us more seriously. You're like, it's okay. You can be fun, guys. You can do stuff for kids. No, children are bad because you'll just think that we're all, you know, kiddie material. And gaming is not like that at all. They're like, we're for everybody. Look, you know, you can sit around and swear while you play D&D, but you certainly don't have to. And it can work for an 8-year-old, and it can work for a 90-year-old, and everyone in between, you know? And I just feel when I was at Gen Con, the sheer number of kids getting into the hobby and the sheer number of families that are proudly, you know, gamers, it was everywhere in a way that I don't see at Comic-Cons. And that really struck a chord with me. And they're also super into finding something new. You know, some of the comic fans can get really entrenched. They want the same book, the same characters, in some cases the same creators every month. And the gamers are just like, oh, well, we want to try and find a new experience, a new game, a new story. And me being a comic book guy there, they were very open to me pitching them on Wayward or Glitterbomb or Skull Kickers, rather than just being like, oh, I only play D&D. Thank you very much. You know.
They cross-pollinate a bit. You know, you're mentioning cons. You did, obviously, again, we're DC local. How did you find Awesome Con this past June?
Awesome Con was great. I hadn't been in, I think, 3 years. And it was really good. People were wonderful. It was a great crowd. And, you know, my career was at such a different point even just 3 years ago with Skull Kickers and everything. And now, you know, Wayward and the Marvel stuff. And it was just really nice. It was a really fun show in terms of the actual con. But then the after con, there was a really great group of guests and we got to hang out. And, you know, there's this thing that professionals call bar con. Every show is bar con. Mm-hmm. So after the show floor closes, we all go to the bar and we kibitz. You know, you obviously you gossip and you talk about what's coming up, and you just get a feel for what's happening in the industry. And the bar con at Awesome Con was top notch. Oh, everyone was really into it, and there was just really good camaraderie all around, which was nice.
Yeah, not to get into too much detail, but I got kind of smashed with Joe Harris and John Layman and Megan Hutchison at this one. So yeah.
Well, that's pretty funny because I think on the first night I was with Joe and John as well. If you're with John, you're almost inevitably going to get pulled into some madness. So John's good people, but you know, be prepared. He's of course he's coming for it. Yeah, he's great. I really like John.
So just to take us out, Jim, you know, again, September 20th, Wayward number 23, Glitterbomb, the Fame Game #1. Is there anything else you want to plug?
Sorry about that. I'm still writing Dungeons and Dragons comics for IDW. So I've got Frostgiant's Fury, which will be wrapping up soon, and then we'll have the trade out, I think, before Christmas. So that's been a ton of fun to work on. I co-wrote a series for a Canadian publisher called Chapter House called Freelance, and the trade paperback for that should be coming this fall as well, but I don't have an exact date just yet. Mm-hmm. But the last issue of the first series came out last month, so I'm pretty certain that they've got the trade in the pipeline. And then I write Uncanny Avengers for Marvel. You may have heard of them, the Avengers. They're these guys. Bunch of heroes come together. It's pretty cool.
Yeah. There's a movie every now and again, I think.
Yeah. There, you know, so that's been just an absolute blast. I love working in the Avengers office and the stuff we've got planned for Avengers is pretty ridiculous. So I'm very much looking forward to the next month or so as a bunch of cool announcements will be coming down the pipe.
Oh boy. Well, again, September 20th, if you want to get the 23rd issue of Wayward, the first volumes are currently available in comic book stores everywhere, and on Comixology if you're more digitally minded. Again, that first volume of Glitterbomb is out and available, and keep an eye out for Glitterbomb, the Fame game #1, also out on September 20th. And yeah, like Jake was saying, check out Red Sonja Conan, or is it Conan Red Sonja?
Conan Red Sonja.
Of course. Sorry, I apologize.
So they did 2 miniseries. The Dark Horse one has Conan first in the title, and the Dynamite one has Red Sonja first, but I didn't work on that one.
Wow. Then we will not discuss that.
So whatever, you can plug it if you want. But,
and of course, Samurai Jack also for IDW, and Skull Kickers too. That entire series, has also been collected and available. And Jim, thanks again for coming on. It's always such a pleasure having you on, man.
Absolute pleasure chatting with you guys. Thank you. I do, quite a few interviews, and sometimes I talk to people and they don't do any research on the things. So I'm like having to fill in all the gaps. They're like, tell us about this story. And it's really nice when I'm talking to someone and they're like, hey, I read it and I noticed this thing, or this stuff really, struck out at me. And I'm like, oh my God, they actually read the thing. This is great.
I swear I've read all 22 issues. I swear to God.
Yay. There will be a quiz.
Nice. Well, you are a professor, so yeah.
That's right. Turn your textbooks to page. Some people ask me about that, by the way. Just like they'll say to me, do you talk about comics to your students? I'm like, well, sometimes it comes up, but like I don't go into the classroom and be like, okay, kids, you got to buy all my books. Like that just seems
that's
awkward.
Textbooks.
Yeah, put that on my textbook list. Pocket the money or whatever.
Monthly.
Yeah, that way the university has to buy them, and you're just like rolling in it, and you're just like, yeah.
Yeah, that's just creepy and wrong. So some of the kids are into the comic thing. Although it's funny because I think they're not as into the superhero stuff. So sometimes, like when I said I was doing Samurai Jack, that was finally when half of them thought I was cool. Up till that point, no one gave a damn.
Well, no Street Fighter fans out there in the audience.
Not as many as there used to be. I think they think the Street Fighter stuff's relatively cool. I don't know. I don't know anymore.
What the crazy kids are into. Well,
I don't know what these kids are into.
Yeah.
It's the kids who are wrong.
That's right.
Well, Jim, thanks again for coming on, and again, check out all those fine books.
Thank you kindly.
Lovely chat.
Oh yes,
lovely chat as always. Good talking to Jim. Thanks again for coming on. And again, that first issue of Glitterbomb, the Fame game, is out in comic book stores everywhere today, Wednesday, September 20th. You can also get the 23rd issue of Wayward, but all 22 issues of Wayward prior to that are also available.
Mm-hmm.
You can get them in trade paperbacks and all that jazz, and of course the first Glitterbomb series. And while you're at it, get Skull Kickers too, and
Conan Red Sonja too. That beautiful hardcover.
Uncanny Avengers.
Yeah,
Thunderbolts. Yeah.
He's a busy man.
He is, and he's a teacher too.
Yeah, that's crazy.
So yeah, you guys saw a film lighting up the cinemas, setting records.
Yeah, we saw it. Get it? Because we saw
saw it.
Stephen King's It. And it was the shit.
Yeah.
Not shit, but the shit.
It's one of those ones where after it was over, I turned to Chris and I was like, I can't remember the last time I had more fun watching a horror movie.
Yeah.
And it wasn't because, like, for me, I think the highlight or like the top of the tops in recent memory for me of a horror movie that just fucking obliterated was the Evil Dead 2013.
Yeah.
Whatever you want to call it. That was just relentless awesomeness, and I loved it. I still have yet to watch the unrated one. I haven't on Blu-ray, but I need to watch it.
It was ruthless aggression.
It
like
was
John Cena.
Yeah, and so I mean that was just, but I wouldn't say you had fun watching that. The end is badass, but it's you're fucking going insane the whole movie.
Yeah.
This one, it's really great because it's this it's focusing exclusively on just the Losers Club as kids because as we know it follows them as children and as adults. And which is a good movie, by the way.
Is
if
it?
you like
I still haven't seen it.
It's good. The great soundtrack too.
Yeah.
There's been some really great, like, really kind of weird, creepy original horror movies. Like that was one. Hush, I think, was another one that was very cool about the woman who's.
Was it Don't Speak?
Well, no. There's
no, there was also a movie.
There's the Hush where the woman is deaf. with what's his name, Jim from not West Wing, Jim from Newsroom.
Newsroom.
Yeah, and then what the hell was the name of the other Jane Levy, Fede Alvarez one?
Don't Breathe.
Don't Breathe.
Yes.
Yeah, that was fantastic.
Part
too.
of the people with disabilities trilogy. Like next it'll be someone that can't just
You've got Hush, you've got Don't Breathe, you've got
yeah.
it'll have to
Can't
be
Feel.
like mute.
Yeah.
And then it'll just culminate in a new horror Tommy.
genre. Yeah, the Senses trilogy.
Yeah.
I guess Wait Until Dark is what kickstarted it all.
But anyway, it is kind of, again focuses on them as just kids. And I think the strongest thing about this, aside from having Stephen King kind of being the blueprint of it, and I think it's very much his own movie too.
Mm-hmm.
I started up the Audible book again because it was really long, and I was kind of falling not out of love with it, just kind of falling out of it because it's just it's very intense. There's a lot going on. But Steven Weber is what keeps drawing me back in because he's fucking astounding reading that book.
He's amazing.
Puts
at
an
it.
insane a performance in it.
Yeah.
Of Wings fame,
Yeah.
And
of Paul McCartney's Wings.
Yes. You know what's great about Wings?
Hmm.
Kelsey Grammer played Frasier on an episode of Wings, which is cool. So
Shared
he
universe.
he won a Emmy for playing Frasier on Cheers, Frasier, and Wings.
Yeah.
Pretty cool. Anyway,
All the same Emmy. Like he got.
yeah,
an Emmy
they
for
were like,
being
just
Frasier.
fucking here.
Well, I'm just saying it would be weird for him to have an Emmy for guest appearance. Do they have a guest
Yeah,
appearance?
that's what he won it for.
Oh, it is?
Guest
Oh.
appearance. Yeah.
Well, then never mind. Good on you, Kelsey Grammer.
And so, but again, it's focusing on the kids, and it's this really kind of great coming of age tale.
Mm-hmm.
But also throws in this, horror figure. I don't want to go too much into detail. People aren't sure because I think I've actually talked about it with people, and when I told them what the movie's kind of about and kind of the backstory, they had no idea.
Yeah. Which a little weird since there's a book and a movie.
Yeah, but
about it.
Yeah.
But I get. I mean, some people just aren't exposed to things.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean the performances are all top notch. I mean the kids. I mean they really make the movie work. I mean Bill Skarsgård as Pennywise, the dancing clown, is fantastic.
Yeah.
He does a really good job of he never really plays, which is smart. Was it Tim Curry's performance is very he does this thing where he's very kind of it's a fantastic performance, but what makes it great is he plays it very kind of fun and carefree, and then he'll turn, and that moment of the turn is really fascinating to watch. And of course, the best example of that is the Georgie scene, which you watch that again. Tim Curry's performance, it's astounding. I mean, it's spellbinding watching that.
Yeah, he plays it like a clown that happens to be in the sewers.
Yeah, but then he has that moment where Georgie asks, will it float? And the moment he hears that, it triggers this almost erotic pleasure in him, and the way he plays it is the time, but he has fun playing creepy.
Yeah.
Very rarely do we see him in the movie, now that I come to think of it, rage. You know what I mean? He's still attacking people as Pennywise. It's very fun. I mean, there's a scene where they're having the apocalyptic rock fight, and I think that might be the scene. And one of the kids looks over and he sees Pennywise in the bushes, and he pulls up a severed hand and waves at him with it.
Yeah.
And so again, he's having fun with causing all this chaos.
Yeah.
But again, there's moments where it's really funny. It's a really funny movie, and it's not you're laughing because you're scared all the time. And my thing is I wouldn't necessarily consider this movie terrifying.
And then it turns on a dime.
It'll turn on a dime, but you have plenty of warning. Also, Batman 89 reference. Because it's set in 89, they're going to fucking...
Yeah, it's
well, it's not really a reference,
it's on the marquee in the movie.
The greatest theater of all time that they pass throughout the Dairy Theater, at one point is playing Batman 89 and Lethal Weapon 2. Mm-hmm. And then later on it plays Nightmare on Elm Street 5.
Yeah.
And it's kind of funny because these kids, none of these kids, if they had saw these movies, would have given a shit. Because Batman 89 has a killer clown in it. They're really fighting a killer clown, so that movie goes out of the window. And then, Freddy 5, they're dealing with basically the same kind of thing. So those kids would have been like, we're living this shit.
Lethal Weapon 2 is...
Yeah, Lethal Weapon 2 dealing with, apartheid.
Shifting South Africans.
Yeah, the South African apartheid or whatever.
Diplomatic community from this other
Oh,
planet.
that was so great if they fucking would have like dropped that in there, like
But,
in the end, instead
yeah.
of like we're not afraid of you anymore. He just goes, it's just been revoked.
But and Pennywise is very similar in terms of like what he feeds on as Freddy Krueger is, because like the whole thing is that Freddy Krueger is feeding on your fear as well as your soul, and that's what Pennywise does essentially.
Yeah, but yeah, overall, just a fantastic movie, and when the horror does kick in, it's a sense of dread because you're enjoying the movie as just this fun coming of age kind of drama. And then you're like, oh my God. And, it's super violent, pretty, at times intense, but and I think, again, the horror movies I love are not horror movies that are about shocking you with jump scares and loud noises. And it falls into that trap sometimes because most horror movies do that. But the sense of, no, that Pennywise is here. Here's the balloon.
Yeah.
Here's Pennywise right here, and you can't do anything about it.
Yeah, it has more of a Jaws feel of like building the suspense.
Yeah, and it's all about suspense, and they do a pretty good job with that. I mean, I think the biggest, when they go into the house that's been burned down, is kind of the biggest thing of that, where they're literally opening doors to get out, and dead bodies are in it, and people are breaking bones, and it is kind of like having his most fun with the kids until the end of the movie. The end kind of feels a little anticlimactic, because it's not really the end.
Yeah.
Because, we're going to go. I was wondering
there was no battery acid.
There was no battery acid, yeah. I was hoping that there was going to be a nod to the phone ringing, like, them as older.
Yeah, like a tease.
Because they didn't have to, they haven't cast anybody. They haven't really written the script yet. Because they had to wait to see if it was going to be a hit. And it clearly is a hit, and it's clearly getting made, which is really awesome. But I thought they would do something where like they'd have, they'd make it clear that it was a certain character, and the phone rings, and he picks up the phone, and it's dope, it's on. But I think with the way they did it though was good, was well done in the end. A nice little like fade in of chapter 1, kind of like, oh shit, here we go. But yeah, overall,
there was a person in the audience at our screening that was like, "What?"
Oh yeah. They're gonna do this again. So no, I mean it's one I would put it as top 3 of the year for me so far.
Now I remember as we were leaving, hadn't even passed the honeymoon period yet, and we both agreed that there were a couple elements that we were just like, the fuck.
Yeah.
A couple things that we did not appreciate of the movie. Mostly in the Pennywise effects.
Yeah, the effects were a little like, obviously when effects are happening, but they weren't like that.
A lot of them were really good. Like the floating kids and the fucking the homeschool kid. What was his name? Was he Mike?
The homeschool kid. I don't think there was a homeschool kid.
Yeah, there was the one with the bolt
farm
gun.
Farmer's kid.
Oh yeah, Mike.
Yeah.
Mike, yeah.
But like his parents are the ones that like died in the burning fire, and when Pennywise is first fucking with them, he sees their hands like coming through the door.
Yeah.
Like that was really good.
That was. And the door opens and he's just standing there, and it's fucking freaky as shit.
And the mouth effects on Pennywise I thought were cool, like with the
when
the
his teeth would come out. Yeah.
Like a lot of that, but like there was just some things that was like, why'd you shoot the scene where he's dancing around in his little Pennywise the dancing clown box using iPhone face stabilization?
Oh yeah, that was kind of lame.
That looked rough. Or every time he ran.
Yeah, they do that like
every time he charges someone.
Yeah,
they do that bullshit like he goes blah, 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 like that noise he makes, and then like
they speed up the film and they make it shaky like that one shot in Fight Club where it worked really well for Fight Club, but
yeah, they make the face shaky thing sucks. I mean, don't do that anymore. Like, let this be the time they stop doing that, because it's like it isn't a great movie and it didn't ruin it. But it's always been stupid. Yeah. I mean, Jacob Slider is probably the only time it's been scary, because that's the first time they really used it. But like everything else, fuck off of that.
And then the thing that threw me off, and unfortunately was like right at the beginning of the movie, with the Georgie scene, and he pops his head up, like most of his face is in shadow, but then like they did this effect on his eyes where they were lit, but they clearly did it in like post-production where they just ramped up the exposure, and it just looks terrible and grainy.
Yeah.
I know that because I've done that before.
Yeah.
And it just looks bad and like someone who doesn't know what they're doing, which is me when I was doing it because I was trying to figure out what I could
The one
do.
time it does really work is when Mike's having that kind of like horror scene of the burning bodies. They
Yeah.
open it and he's like hanging in the meat locker.
Yeah.
And his eyes are lit up. That was really creepy.
Yeah, that was good.
There is some truly disturbing imagery in the movie. And that was cool. Like, especially with the headless kid walking around. I was like, that's fucked up,
That was
man.
awesome.
And you're just like following this kid and the way he's like stumbling around, and it's like not funny because like it's fucking insane. It's kind of funny a little bit because it looks just kind of like you're so like, what is this?
But that was that uncomfortable.
Yes, there's the uncomfortable. Oh fuck! But also like they make you care about the kids immediately because I was telling Sam about this earlier. When Ben from Soch. When Bev goes to sign his yearbook and he has no signatures, and they play that so well, that little beat.
Oh,
they don't do melodramatic, but it's like a tearjerker moment, like all of a sudden, and you're like, again, and then also the New Kids on the Block stuff throughout it was really funny. I mean, there's no big payoff with that, which is fine. There's not like, Pennywise turns into Donnie Wahlberg, and
old Donnie Wahlberg.
Yeah.
That's what I'm afraid of.
Yeah, he's like, I'm married to Jenny McCarthy.
I'm in one of the Saw movies.
Yeah.
I'm a co-owner of a hamburger franchise.
Yeah.
We never were able to open up our DC location.
And but yeah, I mean, there's some funny shit because of the New Kids on the Block, and I don't think they overdo the '80s stuff either.
No, it wasn't like Stranger Things didn't really overdo it too bad, but there's been plenty of other things that like it's just like, hey, look, we're the '80s. It's the '80s, guys. Look, Ronald Reagan is president again.
So Hot Tub Time Machine.
Yeah, that's one that did it.
Yeah, but also like I remember early on they have like a Beetlejuice poster up.
Yeah,
and I was like, that's fucking cool. And maybe it was just me when I didn't notice it right away, but they show it 3 times, and then after the 3rd time, it's time for Georgie to die. I just thought that was kind of funny. Like, this is when the monster shows up.
It's
the
showtime.
Clown. Yeah. Maybe that was just me, but I feel like it was like camera pans. Oh, it's the poster. Camera pans back. Oh, it's the poster. Camera pans back. Oh, it's the poster. And then it cuts out and Georgie's running around.
The director, he listens to our podcast.
Yeah.
I bet he's going to be very happy.
Yeah. Or he's like, no, it was like 7 times, you fuck. And I was like, okay, well.
Learn to fucking count, Jake.
Stop using shaky
God.
face.
Yeah, right. If the director was actually listening, I doubt he would have gotten this far.
Yeah, he would have been like, oh, fuck you. I'm like, fair enough. You made a really good movie, though. But I mean, like I said, a movie that I enjoyed this much, we're really grasping at straws for stuff to hate.
Yeah.
Not hate, just stuff to dislike.
Literally
Like I said,
just wanted to point out that...
Yeah, there's just a couple like effects I thought didn't work well. Like when he goes to bite Georgie's arm, I remember it looking kind of weird. He's like, blah, blah, blah.
It was kind of like a hungry hippos kind of like...
But then they go for it because it cuts to him and it's just artery spray and he's like crawling away. I remember you because I remember I was sitting next to you and this happens because you've at least got that far in the book. And I remember you and Jesus.
Yeah, because I wasn't expecting them to go all out.
Like womp, womp, and it's almost like I was telling Sam too. It's almost like Jaws, like the beginning of Jaws, like it's over like that. Yeah. Like it does a slow mo thing where he's trying to crawl away and it's like, oh my god, this 8-year-old kid with like blood, and then just pulled back in, and then a great shot of this old lady looking out and seeing blood now in the rain,
blood in the water,
and being like, what the fuck? So, I would recommend seeing it. Very good film, and because I really
it's The Founder, even though they both star clowns.
Yeah. What's the better horror movie?
Seeing Michael Keaton run up.
That's
pulling
right.
his pants up on a golf course, or seeing a kid get his arm ripped off.
No.
There are moments where I see The Founder. 1, it's on Netflix. 2,
that's right, it is, yeah.
2, it's like semi-regularly on sale because nobody fucking wants. You know who's a producer behind The Founder?
Who?
Jeremy Renner.
Oh,
wow.
So you can thank him for it.
You know who should never produce no.
Hey, can I put my name on this?
Yeah.
Yeah, sure, buddy.
Go for it.
Yeah,
You're out of Mission Impossible.
I know people that loved The Founder.
I do too, yeah.
And I'm like, why?
Were they over the age of 45?
No.
Interesting.
Yeah.
They did work at a McDonald's. Not while they were watching it, but like they enjoyed working at McDonald's. So maybe she was like,
yeah.
My people.
Yeah. Roy Croc. Yeah. All right. Well, unless you guys got anything else going?
No, see it. Go
I recently signed up for this new subscription service, and by new I mean new to me and kind of new to the Americas, the United States, if I may. But it's been around in the UK for about a year now. But it's from this company called Eagle Moss Collectibles. They specialize in collectibles, like scale cars and stuff like that. So they're rolling out this thing that I hadn't seen before. Apparently, there's a couple other companies that do it, but it's a subscription-based build your own model kit. This particular one being for the time-traveling DeLorean from the Back to the Future series. And I emphasize series instead of one of the specific movies because they will give you variant parts. Like I know for a fact they give you both the nuclear reactor and the Mr. Fusion, so you can choose whether you want the Part 1 or Part 2 version of the vehicle. No word yet on if they give you the rail tires or even the white wall tires or the fuse box on the hood.
Do they give you the different license plates?
I have not seen the alternate license plate, the barcode license plate. I've only gotten the 1985 out of time license plate. So I don't know if you have the option to do the barcode license plate, but I assume that since you get the Mr. Fusion, they'd offer it because the attention to detail on this thing is ridiculous. And like I said, people in the UK have had it for about a year. There's YouTube videos of people putting them together, which I've been watching religiously because they're really easy to follow and digest, and it's been the thing that's been keeping me from like clawing my eyes out waiting for this thing because it is a rather slow process. Like they send you a handful of materials and a magazine, or a couple magazines each month, and like the idea is that you get one issue for each week of the month. So so they'll send you 4 issues at once, and then 4 handfuls of parts, and then each magazine has both the instructions for those parts and a whole bunch of like behind the scenes articles and whatnot. So it's pretty fun, but like the company, one of the biggest complaints in all of these YouTube videos is that the company is always behind, they're always like delivering things late or something like that. I don't know if it's like a stock issue or if they're just not prepared for how many people that, actually wanted to do this. But it seems fun. The guys in the UK are like up to issue almost 40 now. I'm on issue 2 because the deal is you get the first 2 issues for like $3, and then you have to wait a month before you get issues 3, 4, 5, and 6. But yeah, so right now I have the back bumper completed, which looks pretty cool. It's the size of my hand, and if anyone's seen me in person, you know that I'm a giant. My hand's pretty big, so I can't wait to have the completed thing. It's a fucking 2.5-ish year commitment because it's 130 issues, and they've said that they might add on more issues later as they find things that like people want, as variations and stuff like that. So there might be more stuff that they add to it later on. But yeah, so that's gonna be fun. Cool. Yeah.
Well, thanks.
Oh, and I'm also documenting it. Sorry, I'm also documenting it as I go along. Follow my Twitter at EGNolan, and I'll post about where I'm like posting videos and pictures of it as I'm doing it, just so I can be part of the cool kids group with all these guys on the YouTubes
and the Twitch.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thanks again to Jim Zub for coming on our little program for 3 times now. And like we say in the interview, he really does kind of kick off what the show has become, Comic Book Press. Because, it was something we kind of, it was a nice happy accident, and he's the one that made it happen and made it happy. So yeah, that first issue of Glitterbomb, the Fame Game, is out in comic book stores now, as is issue 23 of Wayward. Also check out his work with Uncanny Avengers. This has been another installment of Catching Up. I'm Sam.
I'm Chris.
I'm Jake.
Fried chicken.
Thank you very much.
Good night, Eric Bana.
This has been another Geek Out production. If you enjoyed what you heard, hey, we've got a special episode every Friday. Of course, there's the usual catching up show every Wednesday. And you get book club episodes just about every Tuesday these days. Thanks for listening.